everyone. This is Stan from Runecast, and I'm joined here by Aylin. Today we're going to be talking about how to secure your hybrid cloud, VMware and AWS cloud with Runecast Analyzer. I will just give everyone 1 more minute because I still see some people joining, and we will start very shortly. Okay, so let's get started. Just to let you know that this session is being recorded, so all of you will receive links to this recording shortly after we finish. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Stanimir Markov, but everybody calls me Stan, and I'm VCDX number 74, and also one of the co-founders and the CEO of Runecast. And I'm joined here by Aylin Sali, who is our CTO.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so this is the agenda for today. I will try not to keep it for a full hour, so we'll try to be very on point and concise. We will start looking at what kind of problems in IT operations we have seen and what kind of problems are solved with Runecast Analyzer. And also in this session, we'll be talking a bit more about not just VMware, but also AWS, what kind of misconfigurations can happen there and what can happen if you misconfigure something in AWS. We will see how Runecast differentiates from other solutions on the market. And last but not least, we will dive into the product itself. So I'm going to show you a demo of the latest Runecast Analyzer version 4, and we will see how you can find potential security problems in your VMware environment and also AWS environment. Now, before we start, I will just start a poll because I'd like to know how many of you are familiar with Runecast Analyzer. I'll start it right now, and you can go ahead and vote. So you are either using it regularly, you tried it once or twice, maybe you're just familiar with it but never used it before, or not familiar with Runecast Analyzer at all. This will really help us understand how much to focus on the introduction of Runecast Analyzer. One more thing while you're selecting your answer is I'll be the main one presenting, and Aylin is here next to me, so he can answer any questions you might have throughout the course of the presentation, but we will look at some Q&A also towards the end of the webinar as well. So feel free at any point during the presentation to ask your question in the Q&A box. All right, I see that most of you voted, and I see that about half of you, almost half of you, are not familiar with Runecast Analyzer at all. So certainly I'll explain what Runecast Analyzer is. I'll give you a bit of an intro, and afterwards we're going to focus on the security stuff. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Okay, first of all, I mentioned that I'm one of the co-founders. Aylin is another co-founder of Runecast. We, together with the rest of the co-founders, we used to work for IBM for many, many years. We built there the VMware Center of Excellence, and we were managing most of the IBM accounts running VMware across the EMEA region. We had to do a lot of firefighting while we were doing that. So in day-to-day operations, we had a reactive monitoring system that could tell us if something went down, maybe some server crashed with a purple screen of death or some other serious problem. And usually we were spending hours or sometimes even days to find the root cause and to remediate the problem. In many occasions, in fact, more than 90% of the cases, after all this troubleshooting, we ended up reading a knowledge base article or some other white paper or online article that was describing the problem and the resolution. So that's when we realized that if we're able to use all that very valuable, human-readable, unstructured data in knowledge bases, white papers, security guides, and so on. And if we could use that proactively to discover potential issues in your environment before they cause some major security issues or outages, that will bring incredible value to anybody that's doing IT operations. That's where the idea of Runecast Analyzer came. And along the way, we decided to solve other problems that we saw in IT operations. A big problem is that we had to do security compliance analysis for each one of the customers that had different security compliance policy. And largely we had to do that manually. So for each customer, there was a different security compliance policy, big spreadsheet of settings. We had to go and check for each ESXi host, virtual machine, virtual switch, data store, if they're configured according to that security compliance policy. Even though we did that on these kind of health checks that were taking a long time on regular basis, anytime when there was an audit, there was always some gap discovered due to some configuration drift or some other reason. Another problem that we decided to solve with Runecast Analyzer is that the standard best practices, either for VMware or now also for AWS, were rarely always followed. So anytime when we had to go to a new customer, do a fit gap analysis and see how aligned they are with best practices, and we gave recommendations after thorough analysis, even if they aligned their environment to best practices, 6 months down the line, they were misaligned again. In general, as virtualization became more and more popular, and now we have public cloud and combination hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, there's increasing complexity of IT systems, and IT admins are really, it's really difficult for everybody to catch up with all this new information, all the best practices, and all the issues that are being documented out there. In fact, many of us that came in as Windows, Linux, VMware admins had to start upskilling also and understanding more how to configure AWS, maybe Azure, GCP. So things have become more and more complex. It's rare really to find an expert who knows everything. So that's where the value of Runecast Analyzer comes in, removes that complexity and uses all that vast amount of information to discover potential issues before they happen. I'm just going to turn to Aylin now, because with the latest version of Runecast Analyzer, so for those of you that don't know Runecast, up until December last year, Runecast Analyzer was integrating with the main VMware products. So vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and Horizon, so the main components of the VMware SDDC. We have patent pending rules engine, which is quite universal, so it can be used for any technology out there. And the latest technology we added integration for in December was public AWS. And we were thinking actually a lot, what will be the next step for Runecast Analyzer? What else to integrate with? Where can Runecast bring the biggest value? And we turned to public cloud and specifically AWS. We spoke to many customers and prospects, many people in the community, and we found out that there could be quite serious issues if you misconfigure AWS, and there are just some examples here on the slide. So Aylin, if you could comment on that.
Yeah, sure. AWS misconfigurations can actually lead to very serious consequences. Using the public cloud, has the advantage that you can connect to that cloud from virtually anywhere in the world, but so can attackers do, ranging from just teenagers in high school just trying their luck and practicing their white hat skills to really malicious groups that can exploit vulnerabilities and these misconfigurations. And we see it almost every day in the media, some attacks going on, some companies being breached. And here on the slide, we have some relevant examples of these breaches where almost all of them were caused by misconfigurations on the AWS accounts of those companies. And AWS has this shared responsibility model where they make sure that they protect everything that they can, but still is the responsibility of the customer to ensure that they configure properly their security policies, their firewall, and so on, and don't let any resources like S3 buckets mainly that can be exposed and exploited, or even like metadata that can be then leveraged to get deeper access in the environment. Also attacks, like simple attacks that can bring down SMBs or even enterprises can be there. As we know with MageCart, for example, there are so many domains and websites that were extremely easily hacked via these unprotected AWS S3 buckets, just like one of the simplest examples out there. And the consequences of these breaches can be really damaging for the reputation and the business. As we can see in some of these examples, the data that is exposed is highly sensitive in some cases.
Okay. Thanks, Aylin. So this is where Runecast Analyzer comes in. For those of you that are familiar with Runecast and are using it, it's not new information, but the way Runecast Analyzer is shipped is as a virtual appliance. So it's about 1 gig OVA that you can simply download from our website, import it in your VMware environment, and then you can set up the IP address and connect it to all the endpoints. So vCenters, NSX managers, Horizon connection service if you have Horizon, and as of December last year, you can also connect to your AWS accounts. So we keep shipping the appliance in the same way as before. In order to start using it, you need to deploy it in your VMware environment. Later on, we will make it available to be deployed directly in AWS as well. But as of now, you deploy it in your VMware environment, you connect it to your VMware endpoints and also to your AWS accounts. As mentioned, the main idea behind Runecast is to automate this valuable, unstructured, human-readable knowledge that comes from knowledge bases, best practices, white papers. Our internal platform, which is AI-assisted, is also monitoring social media, so some popular Twitter accounts, bloggers, forums, because some of the issues are first documented by popular bloggers or by the community before they're actually recognized by the vendor. So we make sure to vet those, to validate them, and if there are valid problems, we add them as rules, machine-readable rules inside the product, so that you can be protected against the latest known issues, even if they're not officially documented by the vendor. So that's very useful as well. We started adding a lot of security compliance checks against popular standards as well. One of the most popular ones is PCI DSS for financial institutions. We have very comprehensive PCI DSS security checks. And those checks are not only validating whether your configuration in your VMware or AWS environment is according to PCI DSS. We have also written technical justifications why specific technical checks map to specific security controls and requirements from PCI DSS. So since you have this mapping and any incompliances, plus you have a historical detailed overview of at least 365 days of your security compliance posture. So you have all this reporting out of the box in case you have an audit or day-to-day you're striving to cover some of those security compliance gaps. And this goes not just for PCI DSS, but for any of the issues that Runecast Analyzer scans against. So continuing with the security compliance profiles, we also added DISA-STIG for federal agencies, HIPAA for healthcare institutions, BSI for German public institutions and critical infrastructures, and something that we're working on right now that's coming up pretty soon is also the CIS security standard. And we'll keep adding more and more security profiles to that list. Apart from just security, Runecast scans against availability issues, performance, recoverability, manageability problems. One really successful feature from last year that we added is the HCL analysis, which helps you discover any incompatibilities of firmware, BIOS, driver versions of your servers, IO devices against your ESXi versions, vSAN versions. Not only will it give you the current gaps of compatibility in your current environment, but you're able to simulate upgrades of your environment, and in just seconds you're able to see if there will be any incompatibilities if you decide to upgrade to a different ESXi version. So that's pretty useful. And in Runecast Analyzer version 4, we added also integration with AWS with initial AWS best practices and also PCI DSS checks. And we'll keep adding more and more content that will be used for scanning at the AWS accounts. Runecast Analyzer, as mentioned, is deployed usually on-prem in your VMware environment. It doesn't upload any data over to the internet. Of course, it needs to update itself, but it's important to remember that this appliance, it's one single virtual machine, so it has a quite small footprint, and it contains everything. It contains the patent pending rules engine, all the rules, interfaces, so it can even run in a dark site. So it has completely offline capabilities. If you're able to connect it to the internet via secure proxy, you can use the online update. So Runecast Analyzer can update itself with the latest issues, the latest security compliance profiles, and every other update that we release. And all of that can happen automatically. Or if you're running Runecast Analyzer in an offline or dark site environment, then you can just download the update file from your runecast.com profile, attach it to the virtual machine, and perform the update this way. So as we are shifting now Runecast Analyzer from strictly a product for analyzing VMware to a product which is analyzing VMware, AWS. By the way, Runecast Analyzer is also certified for VMware Cloud and AWS. So you can actually use it for any flavor of infrastructure that you have. Sometimes we get the question, how is Runecast different when it compares to other products that are doing analysis for your public clouds? Well, one of the biggest differentiators is that we have a strong history of very strong VMware on-prem analytics, and now we're combining that with the AWS analytics, as opposed to other products out there that are focusing just on public clouds and barely scratching the surface on VMware on-prem. And the second point that is worth mentioning is that all of this is really secure because everything is contained within the Runecast Analyzer appliance. Even if you're analyzing your AWS infrastructure, the configuration data that Runecast Analyzer has to download in order to do the analysis doesn't go to any third party. It still goes within your Runecast Analyzer appliance that runs within your infrastructure. So nothing goes out of your organization. At this point, I have just the second and last poll for today. I wanted to ask you, what kind of infrastructure does your organization use? So you might be using VMware on-prem, you might be using AWS, maybe VMC on AWS, maybe other public clouds like Azure or GCP, or other types of infrastructure. So if you could select all the options or all the flavors of infrastructure that your organization has, or maybe you're serving different other customers, it will be really useful to understand what type of infrastructure you have to manage. And again, you can select multiple answers here. So if you're using on-prem and plus AWS, that's an option as well. Okay, I'll just give you 10 more seconds to complete the final votes, and I'll tell you what the results are, at least from the attendees. All right, thanks very much. So we have 80% on-prem from those that are attending the webinar, 24% public AWS, 8% VMware Cloud and AWS, 28% other public clouds, and 16% is other. Thank you very much for this. And we'll move on to demo. So let me just switch to our demo environment. And so this is the main web interface of Runecast Analyzer. This is what you will get once you download the OVA, import it in your vCenter, in your VMware infrastructure, set up the IP address, and you can just go to the FQDN or to the IP, and you will get this initial login screen. So you can log in with the default username and password, and later on you can create more users, either admin or read-only. You can also integrate with Active Directory, so you can provide admin or read-only rights to specific groups from Active Directory. So I've already connected this particular instance of Runecast Analyzer with several vCenters and AWS accounts, but I want to show you how you can do that. First of all, if this is the first time you're deploying Runecast Analyzer, you will be welcomed by a configuration wizard, so it will be really easy to do that. But in any case, you can always go to settings, connections, and here's where you can add your vCenters, NSX managers, Horizon connection servers, and also this is where you can add your AWS accounts as well. You can add as many as you want. And the same goes with the vCenters and Horizon connection servers. For log analysis on VMware, it's recommended also to enable that. Under log analysis, you can see the vCenters that you have added, and you can select all the checkboxes next to the ESXi hosts under those vCenters, which will simply submit an API call to configure the IP address of the syslog for each one of those ESXi hosts to be the IP of Runecast Analyzer. If you're already using some syslog collector like Loginsight, Splunk, or other Linux syslog, then the IP of Runecast Analyzer will just be appended to the existing configuration, so it will not replace any of these settings. It's important to mention also, since we're talking about security compliance, that the only thing that will be enabled by default initially when you deploy Runecast Analyzer are the VMware security hardening guidelines. So it's important that you come to the security compliance tab and enable any of those standards that you need in addition to that, either DISA-STIG, PCI DSS, HIPAA, or BSI. Once you do that, then you will see all of them under security hardening. All right. It is also recommended to enable the automatic scheduler, which pretty much helps you to configure automated configuration scans that can run, for example, daily basis, weekly basis, or even on hourly basis. But you can always initiate manually a configuration scan by clicking the Analyze Now button here on top. Just keep in mind that the log analysis is always in real time, so anytime when there is a problematic pattern discovered in your VMware logs that links to a known issue from the VMware knowledge base, then this will be a problem that will be listed here under log KBs discovered under the log analysis section. All right, since I've added several different endpoints, vCenters, NSX managers, Horizon connection servers, AWS, if I want to see a high-level overview of all the potential risks in my environment, I can just go to the main dashboard and I can see that all systems are selected here. So this is a combined view of all the problems that I have in my on-prem and my public cloud environment as well. All the critical, major, medium issues, log issues, issues coming from knowledge bases, best practices, and also level of security compliance. As mentioned, the product keeps at least 365 days of detailed configuration analysis data, so you can browse through it. You can see if you are solving the problems in your environment or maybe new ones are appearing. Underneath, you have some useful widgets as well that are dividing all the issues based on configuration, all the configuration issues based on infrastructure layer, like management, VM, compute network, and storage. All right, this is the main dashboard that combines all the issues coming from your vSphere environment, NSX, Horizon, and AWS. Now, since we introduced connection to AWS, we also introduced a new dashboard, which is specific for AWS accounts. So I'm just going to switch to the AWS account that I have already added. And I see here that I have some vCenters, also Horizon connection server. I can look into them as well, but for now, I will just go to the issues for that particular AWS account. And I can see here that Runecast Analyzer scans the 4 main AWS services: EC2, IAM, S3, and VPC. So under each one of these widgets, I can see how many instances I have and security groups, load balancers, EBS volumes, and how many of them are affected by at least one problem, and how many I have in total. I can see information about all the users I have, S3 buckets, VPCs, elastic IPs, network ACLs. I can see also historical view of all the issues on the resources that are being scanned. And something that we'll be adding fairly soon is also a world map here, in case that you have several different locations around the world, so you can see where the problems are mainly concentrated. All right, well, I see that I'm doing more or less okay, but I have some problems here. So I would like to go to all issues view. And we discussed in one of the slides, Aylin was talking about the awful things that can happen if you misconfigured something on your S3 buckets. So I will switch to all issues and I will go to the S3 service to see specifically what was discovered for my S3 buckets. Here I see a historical graph of the problems. Every configuration scan is being saved, so I can see how many issues are discovered on each scan, specifically for S3. In fact, I can even go back in time and see exactly what were the issues and affected objects at any given time. And underneath, I can see the list of those problems, and I can dive into each one of them. So this one is major. It's related to PCI DSS. So especially if it's an organization that has to follow PCI DSS, that's really important. And the title is Avoid Providing Public Access to S3 Buckets. Okay, so well, the first thing I want to see which are the S3 buckets where public access is being allowed. Then I can just click on findings and I can see that I have 2 S3 buckets under this particular AWS account where the S3 bucket policy status is set to allow public access, which can, as mentioned earlier, if that's not the intent, this can lead to really serious breaches. Now, here under technical description, we are describing why this is important and why this particular check relates to PCI DSS, specifically to security control 7.1 from the PCI DSS standard. And you can see here under reference the link to the official PCI DSS standard. So you get all the information that you need. What are the findings? So what are the objects that are misconfigured? How exactly they're misconfigured? So what are the gaps? What is the PCI DSS security control and requirement this specific technical check relates to, and also why this is important, or how this technical check maps to this specific section from the PCI DSS standard. And on top of that, you have all the history for your security compliance posture against PCI DSS currently filtered on S3, but I can look into my entire environment, including AWS and VMware. In this view here, since I have the historical view, I can see that I have more issues between these 2 scans. So you have the ability here to compare with previous result. So you can see what appeared along the way. So what kind of new issues happened. So if we look at the problem that we were just looking at, avoid providing public access to S3 buckets, I see that these 2 buckets became vulnerable between these 2 configuration scans. Yeah, if I click on issue detail, then I can see that's another way to look into the particular issue and the explanation behind it. All right, and remember that we're looking into the context of that particular AWS account. I can always switch to all systems, and this will show me all the issues discovered in my entire environment. Of course, if I want to focus on any of the security compliance standards like PCI DSS, for example, then I can just click on PCI DSS here. I can select specific products. So we were looking into S3 till now, but let's see what we have under vSphere. We have a number of gaps discovered related to password policy, related to ESXi firewall, and many other, for example, port group security policies like force transmits, for example. And traditionally, under details, you can always see the PCI DSS security compliance control and requirement this specific check satisfies. The technical description, which describes the mapping between this technical check and the security compliance control and requirement, and also under findings, you can see the specific objects. In this case, port groups and hosts, where force transmits security setting is set to accept, which does not comply with PCI DSS. In any of the screens that I'm showing you here, you can also export all of this information. You could have just an overview, even together with a historical graph, or you could export it in a CSV or PDF. And if you dive into one of the individual standards, like DSSTIC or PCI DSS, you have even more reporting options. So under PCI DSS, I can also export in an Excel spreadsheet as well. And specifically for PCI DSS, and we're going to introduce that for other security compliance policies as well, you can actually customize some of those checks. So let's just filter on customizable checks and see what you can do with that. This particular check here is looking into your ESXi password policies. And it's making sure that the password policy is compliant with PCI DSS, so it's set according to the recommended value. However, you might have ESXi hosts or clusters which maybe require even more stringent security or less. And that's why we've provided you with the ability to customize this particular parameter. So you can enter specific password policy here and scope it for a specific vCenter or cluster. And from that moment on, Runecast Analyzer will start scanning that particular cluster against the custom value that you specified. And you can customize the parameters of many of those checks. For example, if you want to scan against a specific NTP configuration, if you require a specific IP or FQDN as NTP configuration for some of your ESXi hosts, then you can specify also that under customize. Another way to customize what checks are being performed in your environment is to use the granular filtering functionality. So you can, for any check, any rule that is being performed here, you could click ignore, and you can ignore that particular check from any portion of your environment, from all of your vCenters, AWS accounts, Horizon connection servers, and so on. And all of the filters are created and managed under settings and under the filter tab. So here you can create new filters as well. You can switch them on and off. You can import and export them. So let's say that you have a cluster that is not required to be PCI DSS or DSI compliant. So you can switch off all the PCI DSS checks for that particular cluster very easily. All right. The security compliance profiles here are important, but let me just go back to all issues view, and I will switch to any issues that are affecting security, just to show you that some of the problems that are being detected here are related to specific CVEs, like in this case, Spectre and Meltdown. Any kind of security or any other type of issue which is documented out there, Runecast Analyzer receives that as a machine readable rule, which is used to analyze your environment, so you can always check whether you're compliant against or protected against all these risks out there. Okay, well, I see a lot of red in this environment. I hope this will not be the same for you and your customers. However, if that is the case, obviously you have to spend some time mitigating those problems, or maybe for some of those you can decide to ignore them for the time being, or maybe focus on the critical and major at first. But something that can help you with the remediation is the vRealize Orchestrator. So we developed a Runecast plugin for vRealize Orchestrator, so you don't have to be a VRO expert to use it. You can just deploy the Runecast plugin, and you will have out-of-the-box workflow for securing your VMware environment. That's something that can be extended also with AWS adapter also to AWS. For now, it works for VMware. So once you start this workflow, it will ask you whether you want to secure your virtual machines, hosts, DB port groups. Then it will connect to your Runecast Analyzer instance. And let's just start it here. So I can select a Runecast Analyzer instance. You might have more than one in your environment. Then it will let you select one of the vCenters. And then you can choose whether to remediate VMware guidelines, PCI DSS, HIPAA, whatever you have enabled there. And then you can choose to remediate virtual machines, hosts, or port groups. So once you do that, then you will get a list of objects and issues that are detected on those objects, in this case, hosts. And this workflow will help you remediate those issues that you select automatically. Yeah. So this can really save you a lot of time instead of doing that yourself. I mean, maybe you can wait until you schedule a change and you basically are doing this at the right time. You're not maybe you don't want to make changes in production time, but this can really save you a lot of time to do the remediation as well. Naturally, you can create your own workflows as well, or copy this one and extend it with something else. So it's pretty much up to you how you want to use it. All right, and all of this is something that you can try yourself. So if you're one of these attendees that's responded, if you've never tried Runecast Analyzer before, you can go to runecast.com, register, download Runecast Analyzer. You can download the VRO plugin that goes with it as well, and you can see what kind of issues are detected in your specific environment. Before I move back to the slides, the last thing I wanted to show you is the inventory view here, which is also very useful because you can browse through the entire hierarchy of your on-prem VMware environment or your AWS environment. And you can focus on specific objects, like if I want to see all the issues that are detected for specific host, I can focus also on, for example, just best practices or maybe just security hardening guides, and I can see everything without switching screens, so everything can be pretty much displayed within the same screen. All right, so let's move back to the slide deck. And again, I know some of you are asking questions, but really, if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. It's really easy to try Runecast, just a 1 gig OVA, download, deploy it, set up the IP address connected to your vCenters or AWS accounts, and you can see already what kind of issues are discovered there. All right, these are our Twitter accounts. So it was, I hope it was beneficial to get a good overview of how Runecast Analyzer can now help you with analyzing and discovering security issues in your on-prem VMware environment, in your VMware Cloud on AWS or public AWS environment. We'll be integrating with more and more technologies in future, and we'll be adding more functionality and security profiles like CIS. So one thing, once I finalize with this presentation, is you'll have just one question, one survey. It will be really appreciated if you tell us your wishes. What else would you like to see in Runecast Analyzer? Those of you that have been following us over the years know that we are pretty quick with development. So over the years, the product evolved a lot, and we're listening to you all the time. So if you have a problem that needs to be solved, that you think Runecast Analyzer would be able to solve it with some development, then please let us know. All right, Aylin, are there any particular questions maybe that you want to point out?
Yeah, I was just actually preparing to answer to one of the last questions that is not covered yet in the questions section. If there is any self-healing, there isn't any automatic self-healing, and it's mainly because we are aware that in like most enterprise environments there is like change control and so on, and like most of the self-healing would not even be like used in most of the cases. However, as Stan presented earlier, you can use VRO, the out-of-the-box workflows, or create your own to remediate some of the findings that are there. Runecast Analyzer has a like full REST API to be able to query all the reported issues and all the reported objects for those issues. So it can be like easily scripted also remediation actions for the reported objects.
All right, perfect. And I see that you responded to one of the questions. I think there's quite good interest for the VRO plugin. Yeah. We have, if you just Google Runecast VRO plugin, you will go to the very elaborate blog article that will tell you how you can deploy it and how you can use it. So I think that could be really useful. All right, with that, I would like to conclude today's webinar. So thank you very much, all of you that shared your time with us. And we will keep coming with these webinars. So I hope it was really useful for you. So I would like to wish you a great day or evening, depending on where you're located. Thank you very much.
Thank you.